Architect Divya Chakravarti. She completed her undergraduate studies from SRM University and she went on to pursue her master's in historic preservation and urbanism and study of the built environment from the University of California, Los Angeles. She went on to work for the Department of Planning and Preservation for the city of Pasadena, California. She also did a brief stint of work for Historic Scotland, Edinburgh, UK. She also worked on conservation projects like Kalsa Mahal, Gokhale Hall in Chennai, and Marimalappa Educational Trust in Mysore. She is currently working as a director of Samrakshan Heritage Consultancy. She is also a co-founder of the Artisan Reprisal of Traditional Materials, Method and Technology. She goes on to conduct workshops to revive traditional and lost methods of construction.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series for Bachelors of Architecture. The subject we are discussing is evolution of human settlements. The topic we will be delving into is human settlements as political expression. In this lecture, we will be discussing the contributions of Ebenezer Howard and the contributions of Lewis Mumford, who are two important planners in the history of urban planning. Contributions of Ebenezer Howard. Ebenezer Howard, the main concept he came about was the garden city concept, the most potent planning model in Western urban planning. This was created by Ebenezer Howard in 1898 to solve both the urban and rural problems. This was source of many key planning ideas during the 20th century. So, in a way you can say Ebenezer Howard started the whole process of urban planning and discussing the problems that emerge in a usual scenario. So, if you look at the important dates of the garden city, between 1815 to 1928 was when Ebenezer Howard worked. 1899 he published the Garden City of Tomorrow. 1903 the Garden City Association was formed. Then you had Letchworth was designed for 35,000 people based on this garden city concept. 1920 Welwyn was another town that was designed for 40,000 people. 1947 Letchworth had 16,000 population and 100 factories. Welwyn had 18,000 population and 75 factories. So, first at UK, then Europe, then US, then rest of the world. So, this is the basic timeline of the work of Ebenezer Howard and the influence of the garden city concept. He lived and worked in several professions in England and the United States during the age of industrialization, during the Industrial Revolution basically, and when many people flocked to cities like Manchester or Chicago to work in the steam powered factories. These came to replace the cottage industries like textile mills instead of spinning and weaving at farms and villages. So, there was a shift of population from rural to urban. Farming started to become rationalized and needed less and less manual labor. So, it became more mechanized. Cities promised more jobs, although living cramped closely together in tenements under the smoke of many such mills also increased the risk of spreading diseases. Steam power made it possible for people to commute by train, so suburbs were built for more healthy living even before the invention of the automobile. But such suburbs with terraced housing were enclosed by more urbanization and provided only for the middle class or the upper middle class. Ebenezer Howard and his concept of the garden city, which was basically the best of both worlds between the town and the countryside, came into being. Some of these, that the towns we just saw, Letchworth and Welwyn, have indeed been constructed in the same design in the early 20th century. Also, he envisaged a permanent open area surrounding such new towns, which was the idea behind the green belt around London after World War II. So, this is the garden city concept, the three magnets. What the magnet does is, what is the thing that country pulls, the main attractions of living in a country area or farm area? Hands-off work, beauty of nature, no lack of place, abundant greenery, abundant water, there is the need, there is no crowded areas. On all of those points of the country area make it very desirable. At the other end, what are the desirable elements of town living or city living? It's obviously places of amusement, it's closer to work, better wages, better chances of employment, you have better, streetscape in terms of kinds of things you can do in the other times of the day, better schools, better social opportunity, and lesser discrimination as well. So what actually happened was, he tried to combine the advantages of country living, the advantages of town living, to make sure that the disadvantages were decreased or removed completely. So the disadvantages of town living you had were overpopulation, overcrowding, lack of sanitation, lack of clean environment, air pollution. All of those were the bad things of town living. And if you look at bad things of country living, no sense of neighborhood. There is no concept of neighbors. You just live by yourself, you do things by yourself, that kind of a thing. And so he wanted to combine both the beauty of town and country, beauty of nature as well as social opportunity. You should have fields, but it should be accessible to work. You should have low rents, better wages, flow of capital. There should be bright homes, good gardens. There should be a combination of both the town and the country, and that was the garden city concept. So if you look at it, he was very particular of what he was looking at. It should have about city area 1000 acres, agricultural land 5000 acres, and a population cap of 32,000 people. And this should be like the kind of layout approximately that should occur. Main roads, cow pastures, forest area, agricultural area, homes, asylums for the blind and deaf. He had decided everything. Then you have to have the grand avenues in the central park surrounded by houses and gardens. So he clearly had envisioned of how a town and its town center should be. This diagram here represents just the details of one section or a ward of a town, which will be useful. So we'll understand what is the basic description of any town. So here you have the central park. The Crystal Palace is nothing but a beautification element. The Fifth Avenue is where you would have your market area and things like that. The Grand Avenue, here you would have your houses. You would have the green belt, lawn and things like that. Cycle workers, boot factories, clothing factories, printing, engineering, jam factory, railway station over here. So everything was like a boulevard, Grand Avenue, a school. So this was a segment that emerged, and it was supposed to be a self-satisfactory segment. So the segment we saw is just this unit that we have discussed in detail. So these are the elements. You can see it's pretty much self-satisfactory. If you lived here and you worked here, your children went to school over here, you had a green belt over here, you have a park over here, your amusement is over here, your market area is over here. So it's a very self-contained area, and he actually had a distance. Between here to here, you should reach in 15 minutes. Between the Fifth Avenue and your house, you should reach in 5 minutes. And the school was centrally located such that the children could easily walk to it without the requirement of vehicular or automobiles. So what are the details of the garden city concept? He actually goes into the precise prescription down to the acreage and even the expenses. So it's first you need to take 6,000 areas of cheap rural land, 1,000 of which are to be reserved for the city. There is a cap for 32,000 people population, after which a new city will have to be colonized right next to this. So what Howard basically wants is, he wants to avoid the overcrowding that happened in London, but at the same time he wants to have industries and factories to offer better jobs, but there should be public parks, private lawns everywhere. The roads are incredibly wide, ranging from 120 to 420 feet for the Grand Avenue, and they are radial rather than linear. Commercial, industrial, residential and public uses are clearly differentiated from each other spatially. The overall goal for Howard is to combine the traditional countryside with the traditional town. For very long, the residents have had to make unfilling choices between living in a culturally isolated rural area or giving up nature to live in the city. But The human society and the beauty of nature are meant to be enjoyed together. That is the crux of the garden city concept. The main problem, the financial linchpin of the plan was that all of the land had to be purchased upfront, so that the increase in property values generated by the growth will be captured by the community itself, which will help the community grow further. Another assumption he makes is that if everything is planned rationally from the beginning, the costly process of retrofitting old infrastructure can be avoided. There was a good grasp of problems associated with rapidly industrializing England, which of course becomes as well as is currently the similar phenomenon in the developing world. He basically identified the real social inequities arising from industrialization. Besides the problems like tangible problems that we could see like population, disease and pollution, there were a lot of problems that were intangible in terms of inequality in society and a lot of class differences that were emerging, and he believed that if this city could avoid that to a certain extent, and if at a local level if you address it, a pro-municipal scope where the government actually builds the cities and lets people live in it. So, it is a little more socialist than capitalist, but it is not completely socialist, because there were still people who owned factories, there were still people who worked in the factories, and there were people who worked in the service industry. So, it was rational planning over the chaotic growth of piecemeal evolution, and it has some merit with even today it has a lot of relevance in the rapidly modernizing context. The particular objects of garden city: to find for our industrial population work at wages of higher purchasing power, at the same time secure healthier surroundings and regular employment. To enterprising manufacturers, cooperative societies, architects, engineers, builders and technicians of all kinds, it is intended to offer a means of securing new and better employment for their capital and talents. So, agriculture should be there, no way can you say no to agriculture. At the same time, it is opening a new market for new produce as well as manufactured produce from these areas. It is an object to raise the standard of health and comfort of all true workers of whatever grade. So, this is the socialist principle. Let us improve the life and comfort of everyone, not just the middle class, upper middle class or the workers. The means by which these objects are achieved are healthy, natural and economic combination of town and country life, where the land is actually owned by the municipality. So, on the outer ring of the town you have factories, warehouses, dairies, markets. So, where any pollution that is gone goes away from the outer ring. So, you have the railway station over there which encompasses the whole town. Then you have sidings, which is the main line of the railway, which passes through the estate. This arrangement enables goods to be loaded directly into the trucks, such that the warehouses and workshops are also away from the city and close to the market as well as the railway. So, it does not have to be taken from the truck and the railway back and forth. This is not only affecting a great saving in regard of packing and cartage, but also reduces to a minimum loss from breakage, because by reducing the traffic on the roads, we are lessening to a very marked extent the cost of maintenance. The smoke fiend is kept well within the bounds in the garden city, for all the machinery is driven by electrical energy, and the cost of electricity for lighting and other purposes is greatly reduced. So, now what happens with all the refuse from the agricultural land? This is again used by large farms, small holdings, allotments, cow pastures. So, there is a natural competition of these various methods of agriculture, which is tested by willingness of occupiers to offer the highest rent to the municipality, tending to bring about the best system of husbandry, or what is more probable, the best systems adapted for various purposes. Now, if you look at this, if there is a central city, there is a population increases 32,000 people, then what happens? You have a central city, then you have the highways, then you have another city coming up with the same combination but a smaller one. So the principle is basically, let's not overcrowd any city. We will have a cluster of cities such that needn't be arranged in any particular geometric form. It doesn't have to be circular, doesn't have to be rectangular, but it has to have a interconnecting railway and highway, and these cities have to be connected by high roads with such that it's not overcrowded. There is a sense of continuity. It's grouped around a main central city, but they don't have to go to the central city for anything. It will be there as a mothership, but all these nodes can sustain by themselves. It should be a combination of advantages of a beautiful great city as well as offer the fresh delights of the country life. So now if you look at the Letchworth Garden City and the Welwyn Garden City, the examples of the two cities he came up with, it was inspired by an ideal utopian city, how it should work. It was inspired works on model by Robert Owen and the model industrial towns by Buckingham. It comprised of both town country and town country interactions. So this is the typical layout of what emerged. You have the central city and then these cities came into being. This was the final emergence of what happened. You basically slumless, smokeless cities. There shouldn't be any slums and everyone should have the same quality of life. He analyzed the reasons. He made sure that obviously there is going to be a difference in incomes of people because it's not a socialist society. But what he clearly stated was the quality of life is not dependent on the status of a person. Everyone should have clean air, water, pollution-free life, good food, irrespective of what his earning is. That is a basic requirement of good living. Secondary, the size of the house, the kind of clothes a person wears, all that is secondary and that is dependent on the kind of job he does and the kind of position he is in. But the rest of it should be given to everyone irrespective of which walk of life they are from. So the new city was to have a reasonable distance of 7 kilometers such that it's walkable and within a 5 to 15 minute distance so that the individual cities are well connected as well. So if you look at the applications of it in Letchworth, Letchworth is 35 miles from London. This is Letchworth city over here. Land of 3,822 acres. Reserved green belt is 1,300 acres. It was designed for 35,000 population, but in 30 years it developed with 15,000 population, 150 shops and industries. So obviously there was a decline because this model didn't particularly work because he actually had a socialist kind of attitude towards application of the city. Even though obviously it was not said to be like that, when he wanted equal types of housing, equal kinds of housing, that's what it actually led to. You can see the other cities that came about because of this. This is in France, Sweden and Germany. This is Vällingby in Stockholm, again in Sweden. And this is the cities now. After 1945, the garden city was mutated into satellite or new towns in many countries. So these are mutated values of the garden city concept. What they decided that the garden city was, let's call it a satellite town. We'll have a central town. Obviously, there will be cluttered towns like London, New York, Shanghai and places like that. Let's not disturb those. We'll come out and make another town such that it's connected to the central city with the concept of a garden city. So it was basically a residential suburb or a satellite town. So the simplest issue to be faced is, can better results be obtained by starting on a bold plan on comparatively virgin soil rather than attempting to adapt our old cities to newer and higher needs? This question can only be answered in one way, when the simple fact is grasped that then only the social revolution will speedily commence. We have to decide what is it that we are looking for. Do we want a perfectly running city like a well-oiled machinery, or even if there are cracks, should our old city organically develop into these so-called utopian cities? Now we will move on to the contributions of Lewis Mumford. He is one of the most internationally renowned people for the idea of urban planning, history of cities, civilization, technology, regional planning, environmentalism, as well as he discussed a lot about life, public life in America, and he is one of the most original voices in this field in the 20th century. According to Mumford, cities can be classified along two dimensions. You have form. Form of a city is basically historical development, the physical structure, geographic space, region. Second, function, a stage for human interaction. If a city functions properly, people can be happy, healthy and fulfilled. But if it is not functioning properly, then people are definitely going to be devastated. So whether the city helps or hinders people is dependent on the dominant theme of the era of which the city is part. So when you say what is the dominant theme of the era, watch what period was the city developed in, what was the theme behind developing the city. Mumford defines 6 dominant themes. 3 of these themes or eras are constructive while 3 end up being destructive. So what was his plan for the urban design? Densities must be kept low. The size of the cities must be limited. People must live in natural, open, green environments. Most interaction must be kept on a primary level to assure mental health and the quality of social relationships. The family as the most important primary group is the focus of redevelopment. Neighborhoods are the main units of redevelopment and settlement. So clearly he was part of it is from the garden city concept as well when you're talking about density and size, but he recognized that historically a city will have baggage. It doesn't make sense to start afresh in a new piece of land. Then you have education, which is both formal and informal, which is stressed upon. Vehicular and pedestrian traffic should be separated. Mumford's new cities are complete communities. So new town development policies which emerged in Great Britain and United States, and new town development in Great Britain which came about is Forshaw and Abercrombie. County of London Plan 1945 and the Greater London Plan 1944. So all this they volunteered changed because of Mumford's theory. He characterized his orientation towards the study of humanity as organic humanism. This term is actually very important because it sets a limit on human possibilities, limits that are aligned with the nature of the body. He never forgot the importance of air quality, availability of food, quality of water or the comfort of spaces, because all of this are obviously required for people to thrive. But at the same time, technology and progress can also never be forgotten. So as long as organic humanism was there is obviously, it acts as a braking system. In the speed of technology and progress moving on, we shouldn't forget that we have basic requirements that need to be satisfied. If it doesn't, we have to put a brake to what technological advancements are happening. Mumford believed that what defined humanity, what set human beings apart from other animals was not because of what we could do with our tools and our hands, but it is what we could do with our language, that is the use of symbols. That is what set us apart. He characterizes an area's capability to support life through its levels of complexity. Before the advent of technology, most areas of the planet were bio-viable. This terminology is not from Mumford's time, but it is for us to understand that all cities at one point or the other were viable for living. There were certain forms of technological advances happening rapidly, bio-viability decreases rapidly. So if we are going to technologically advance too fast, which is not considered sustainable, bio-viability also comes down. Mumford did not believe it was necessary for bio-viability to collapse as techniques advanced. However, he held it was possible to create technologies that functioned in an ecologically responsible manner, and he called that sort of technology biotechnics. So technology cannot be ignored. At the same time, we cannot ignore our basic requirements for healthy living. and technology which keeps in manner, which keeps in check about the environment and ecology is what is biotechnics. So, that was a term coined by Mumford at that point of time. Mumford's critique of a city and his vision for cities was they are organized around the nature of human bodies. So, essential to all Mumford's work of city life, it is rooted in an incipient notion of biotechnics, which is livability. How livable is a city? Does it have adequate technology for us to move and thrive and move into the future? At the same time, are we compromising on the quality of life and the bioviability of the city? Mumford wrote, physical design of cities and their economic functions are secondary to their relationship to natural environment and to the spiritual values of human community. So, the physical design of cities is obviously there for should be the primary importance. Economic functions are secondary to that relationship to the natural environment and to that of the spiritual values of the human community. So, nothing can actually be ignored. We have to come to a plane of existence such that all these elements can coexist and offer people a kind of life that we are looking forward. Yes, we want the creature comforts, but what is the price that we are willing to pay? At the end of this, we have seen the contributions of Ebenezer Howard and another very important planner, the contributions of Lewis Mumford. At the end of this lecture, we should be able to answer the following questions. Discuss the contribution of Ebenezer Howard towards city planning. What is the highlight of the garden city concept? Give examples of cities where the garden city concept has been applied. Discuss the contribution of Lewis Mumford towards city planning. Define the term biotechnics. What is organic humanism? That brings us to the end of this lecture. Thank you.